Shalom. Welcome again to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I am your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us. A quick reminder that if you'd like to make a comment or suggestion for the program, please feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Check out the website. Check out the Jewish Sacred Aging Facebook page. We welcome you to what we hope will be a very, very interesting and exciting conversation with my colleague, Reb Chaya Lerner, coming to us from beautiful South Florida. And here to talk about her brand new book, which is a very, very exciting enterprise. The book is called The Torah of Trauma, The Torah of Trauma. Chaya, welcome to Seekers of Meaning. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. It's a nice day today.
Good.
He's
Good.
going well.
We got up, so that makes it already we're ahead of the game.
Yeah, we're breathing. That's
so the Torah of Trauma. You have to explain to us the title. What is the Torah of? There's a lot of trauma in the Torah, almost every chapter. But the title of your book, available at the usual places: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, etc., etc.
No, right now it's only available on Amazon.com.
Okay.
We're working to make it more global.
So the Torah of Trauma. Talk to me about the title.
Many years ago, I joined a Torah study by the name of Joseph's Table on at Temple Israel of Greater Miami. And as I was reading, I've been a trauma and grief therapist for years. I think that's where my niche has found me. And as I went through and wrestled with these texts, I realized everything we have done are going through now and in the 20th century, our ancestors have done as well. And so how do we use what they have done, what they went through, as a guide to how we can handle modern traumas and griefs? For example, it occurred to me that we're dealing with a hostage situation. Abraham and Lot. Lot was kidnapped. And so how did Abraham handle that? So, how do we deal with feeling constrained and feeling overwhelmed? Well, that was done in Shemot in the book of Exodus. How do we deal with a society that is not respectful of each other? Well, God tells us, love the stranger and take care of the orphan and the widow. So all of these things have been in Torah. And now, how do we bring it? How do we weave those stories, our modern traumas, together with what happened to us in the past? And as far as the cover, you can't get any more traumatic than your father wanting to kill you as part of a rite of that culture. And so, so that was the impetus of this book.
So the book takes each Torah portion, unpacks it around a particular event or text, correct?
Correct.
And then you bring your insight as an LCSW and a rabbinic pastor, because you were ordained from the Aleph Seminary, you said in 2021. So you bring those two universes, if I can use that term, together to try to take each Torah portion. So putting on your rabbinic pastor kippah and your LCSW hat or mortarboard, whatever they use, and reflecting on some of my training, taking a step back, how important in all of this is one's family of origin?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of my heroes is Rabbi Tirza Firestone. And actually today I started reading Wounds into Wisdom again with a group that I facilitate with. And what brought to mind as I wrote this book are things that have happened to me, happened to my friends, happened to my family. I come from New Orleans, Louisiana. My parents went through Hurricane Katrina. So it makes you wonder, here's Noah. Noah has a flood. We never talk about what happened to the people who were flooded out. That happened. New Orleans still, it's I think 20 years, and they're still talking about it, and the effects of that hurricane on that city. And I'm sure that the same thing was going on during the time of Noah. Um, so I bring the stories of the Holocaust. My mom and her family were Holocaust survivors, and I saw the reflections of what they experienced at the Holocaust with what was going on with Exodus. So I see that as bringing my intergenerational trauma to the fore, and melding these stories that we read annually. And how does that help us? How does that help us in our healing?
So, if I'm not mistaken, this is not only textually theoretical in a sense,
Hmm.
but were you not involved in the support down in South Florida for the Champlain Towers,
Yes,
which
it
itself
was.
was that's amazing. So I guess one of the questions then is, how did you take your therapeutic training, your rabbinic pastor training, your understanding of trauma with the text, in dealing with those families after that building collapsed?
Yes. So I was right after the collapse. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a rabbi, and she said, this reminds me of the Tower of Babel. I said, you're right. This is the Tower of Babel. And even more so when you have the collection of Hindus and Indians and Jews and Catholics and Christians and all of these people that spoke different languages and different beliefs, all in this one building. And I think that being at the site, ground zero, was so heart-wrenching. That says in Torah that, God heard the Israelites, the slaves crying out. And it was just piercing, heart piercing for me to be there and to witness these people just so broken because they weren't sure whether their family member was alive or not. They were looking, they were searching, maybe that towel up there was my cousins or my uncles. Um, so witnessing this and putting it into the context of what I know based on my own learning, Torah knowledge. Um, One of the things that I did was there were some yeshiva bochers or yeshiva students who were studying Psalms, so I knew which Psalms to tell them. Psalm 23, Psalm 121, Psalm 91. And at first they kind of ignored me. And then all of a sudden, as I was walking out, one of the guys ran up to me and said, which Psalms were those? So those Psalms brought comfort to them as they were going through this period of uncertainty. Another example was that my first day at the trauma center, I was asked to ask first whether I was a rabbi. And of course, I said yes. And apparently, one of the bodies that was just pulled out of the rubble, he was Christian, But his sister had just converted to Judaism. And so what was important to her was to recite Kaddish. So they pulled me in. I just happened to have Rabbi Marsha Prager's Kaddish Siddur on my phone, and I was able to pull the Kaddish out and lead her in Kaddish. And as an experienced pastoral counselor, then I was able to change the mood because it suddenly became a shiva. And so I started asking questions about their brother and bringing his neshama, his soul back to here, to the present moment in this circle of family and first responders who were dealing with the very first victim.
Hi, one of the things that has, I've been thinking about a lot of people, and that's just not me, but you're a good person to ask this. I have this theory, as other people have, that our society, American society, has never fully dealt on a significant psycho-spiritual level with a variety of different traumas. For example, I don't think we've ever really dealt as a society with 9/11. Our immediate response was go attack somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've really dealt with the trauma of the pandemic, which has restructured society. And now we're dealing Jewishly with the trauma of the hostages.
Yes.
If you were able to take that magic carpet ride to Hostage Square and sit with those families, and how would you, given your experience and your training, what would you say?
First of all, it would be very difficult for me to talk with them. And I would have because as my job as a chaplain is to witness. So I would say, tell me how you're doing. Tell me your person's, your beloved's story so that I can honor and respect them. I think eventually being able to tell them that it does get better, because I think what I've learned in my own training is that we change that even though our beloved maybe may have crossed over, we change the relationship with that person. First and foremost, they are still our loved ones. We have learned from them. They have learned from us. Um, but I'm of the opinion, and I know it might be a little controversial, though at times I've talked with clients about this, that person, even though they crossed over and no longer in this body, they're still a part of your life, and they will send messages to you to make sure that you're okay. So even though they have crossed over and you grieve that loss, the relationship has changed. And so that you can now, that they're no longer in this corporal body, they are able to help you and be a part of you and show you how much they love you and care about you if you're open to it.
I imagine that well, your answer triggered in the middle of your book, the Torah of Trauma. I think it's page 103 at the top.
Uh-huh.
You write, quote, "The key to healing from trauma is to see the good, not bad, in everything," unquote. I would imagine that's really how would you explain to those people from the Champlain Tower what good is it? Where's the good in this?
Can I tell you a story
Yeah.
as an explanation?
That's why we're here.
Yes. So this was a very strange experience that I had. Um, a few years ago, I consulted with a psychic, and I was actually talking to him in terms of my family. I had questions about my family. And so we talked about that. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the session, he said to me, there are two girls who are interested in you. And I'm going, what? Because I don't have any experience with girls. My cousin's children are adults. My brother's children are boys and they're adults. So I'm like, what does this mean? And I kind of passed it off. And then I was talking to my friend Rachel Raphael, and she said, did he ask you about Surfside? I said, I don't know. And so after I talked with with her, I remembered that I was seeing a client who was very distressed that two little girls that lived next door were gone. And this was a 4-year-old who always dressed up like a princess, and a 9-year-old, and they're always like saying, how are you? And always being kind and considerate and all that. And I Googled the victims again. And sure enough, these two little girls were part of that came through to talk to me. The point being to tell my client that they were okay. And to me, that was such a powerful lesson and changed relationships. These girls, their purpose in life was to be helpful. Several months later, maybe a year and a half later, I was counseling another woman who I didn't think had any connection with Surfside. What turns out is she was talking to me that she was a dance teacher and an art teacher. And she had been teaching at the community center. And she said, there was these two little girls who always helped out, whether it was to make sure that would open the door to greet people and would provide supplies and all this stuff. And I think the answer to that question is they were there. They're there kind of like, how can we provide the people the healing that they need based on who we are? That it was just a really powerful lesson in the power of the spirit. Did that answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, that it opens the door to a lot of conversation about when that phrase, the power of the spirit, of an understanding that there are levels. I do believe this, that there are levels of reality that our mind in this world we cannot understand. I now believe that,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm open to and am now at my old age comfortable with the mystery as of not knowing, and who knows that there are things which we in our scientific world that our everyday world we're just not. There are levels that we just haven't reached yet or cannot reach,
Right.
but they may be there. And I know the cynic would say, this is just a projection of your own need. So you'll believe that because it brings comfort to you, to which some people must say, so what? If it brings comfort, then what's wrong with that?
Exactly. The universe is far more complicated. The physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual worlds, as Reb Zalman, Schechter Shalomi would say, there are 4 worlds. And, so the universe is far more complex than that we humans can understand and comprehend.
In your book, the Torah of Trauma, you use each of the Torah portions, and you do sometimes, again, as many commentators do, talk about some of the symbolic language and how it relates to what you're trying to do. So one of the things that just jumped when I was reading the book, Genesis 3, the serpent, the mythology of the Garden of Eden, and you talk about that the serpent can really represent varieties of different traumas in one's life. as a temptation, the alcoholism, drugs. I think you include social media, politics. I mean, the way to look at that story of saying there are a variety of different types of temptations, addictions, et cetera, that are placed before that, which will cause trauma.
Exactly. We allow for things like addiction, substance abuse. It could even be streaming and chilling and binge watching Netflix, or gambling, any form of addiction. I think it enters our belief system. If we have belief systems, a political system that we might object to, it affects the family. One of the very first lessons I learned in social work was working with addictions and realizing that there's a family systems there where, the family system has to be balanced. And when you don't have that balance because you've allowed the serpent or this foreign entity to come into your home, then you're upsetting the apple cart, as it were. So the whole idea is you have to come up with a way to bring that balance into being. The other thing is that I think in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden is really kind of a state of mind that we need. And that so often, instead of, are we really focused on making Aliyah, as in, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers, Exodus? We're trying to get back to Eretz Israel. But maybe what we're always trying to do is to get back to Gan Eden.
Oh, yeah.
So when we're thinking of meditation, when we're thinking of vacations, when we're thinking of yoga, qigong, whatever, it's all this idea of psychotherapy. It's all this idea of coming back to that place of perfection, of calm. And so then it becomes this idea of, we need to go back to that place. We're always striving to go back to that place.
Even though you'll never get there.
Well, see, the thing is, I jokingly call this next Torah portion, Mishpatim, Moses comes down from the mountain to wash his laundry, because the reality is we can't be in that place of high emotional calm. I mean, the Garden of Eden and the eviction of the exile of Adam and Eve tells us that we have to have that excitement, even if it's negative excitement. So we have to be able to say, we have to deal with the real world. There are times when we can spend 15, maybe an hour, whatever, going on a retreat, whatever it is, to get back to that calming state. But we need to focus on the world around us.
That's to me, that's the beauty of the image of the wilderness experience, because it's a give and take. It's up and down. It's never always trying to get to the promised land, which I still think is another metaphor for the imagery of Gan Eden, the image of paradise.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's the life journey. It's the Albert Fine poem. Birth is a beginning and death is a destination. But it's the journey that, as everybody says, but it's right out of Jewish tradition.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lovely take on the Prasha Balak, with the talking donkey, in a riff about the healing power of animals.
Yes.
And more we've seen in hospitals, assisted living facilities, critical care, nursing homes, the use of animals, dogs, et cetera, as healing modalities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So one of the very first things that happened after Surfside were that volunteer organizations would bring their dogs. So there were two types of dogs. There were the dogs that went up to ground zero to search for the bodies. And then there were the dogs that just sat in the lobby. And just the profoundness of that the sacredness that people who were not ready to talk about what happened just sat on the floor and hugged these dogs. And some cried. And that was the connection, animal connection to human connection. I remember I was discussing this with a friend of mine, a colleague, whose brother died in 9/11. And she was saying the same thing that at 9/11, that these volunteer organizations would bring the dogs over to the site, the family unification site, and that's where the healing started. And I really believe the power of animals. I always tell people, get a dog. It would make you feel better.
No, I've seen it in hospitals and all kinds of ways. And now the statistics, the literature, just as you say, validates all of this. Can you survive trauma?
I think you can,
How?
by being stronger. I end the book with the prophet Ezekiel's dry bones, and I
Right.
think that's what happens. I think that it's not there's a reason why we read the death of Moses, and right immediately we read about the creation of a world, because I think that's what happens. We have to work at it. I work on my trauma all the time. Just gives me a plug for the Nechama Minyan, an group of people that meet every night except for Shabbos, and we pray and we talk to God, and gives us an opportunity to do that. But I think it's like these dry bones will come back to life, and it makes us stronger. Knowing, and especially if you know that that even though that person's soul has left the body, the people are more than just their bodies. They're also the spirit. And so I know that I will be meeting my family again and my loved ones again. But in the meantime, I'm stronger for it. I can help lead other people out of their traumas by being there, witnessing them, and maybe sharing my own experience so that they can continue on. Well, I worked with many Holocaust survivors. That was what I did before I became a chaplain. And I could tell the difference that not very rarely did I come across someone who didn't have high blood pressure. Very rarely, somewhere along the way, there would be cancer, there would be dementia. These are things that are because we don't deal with the trauma. You cannot get a Holocaust survivor to come sit down in front of a therapist. Not going to happen. But I have known courageous, resilient survivors who go repeatedly over and over and over again on the March of the Living, which is an organization that brings survivors and teenagers to concentration camps and then Israel. So, and I've asked them, what brings you? Why do you do that? And it gives them the comfort. It makes them stronger. So,
Well, no, I wanted to like put a code on that, because exactly what you're talking about, the passage that you write about Ezekiel, there's a quote that I wrote down because I think it actually sums up exactly what you're talking about. It's a good way to bring this to a close. You wrote, we can rise again despite our griefs and traumas to a better world. We can rise again despite our grief and trauma to a better world, unquote. But it does take a lot of work, and it does take a lot of time. And that's where your work comes in. The fantasy of I've dealt with it and I've moved on is a fantasy, isn't it?
Absolutely. And people want that instant fantasy. And I joke, I did at my smicha and my and my graduation, I didn't get a magic wand. So it's hard. You have to go through the pain, and it's not easy to go through that pain. But the more you do it, the more you release the toxins so that you can live in a freer existence.
It's really like, in a way, the second paragraph of the Amidah, the Atagi Bor, where in the tradition it says Mechayim Etim, and which is bodily resurrection. But it is like a psycho-spiritual resurrection when you walk through this wilderness of dealing with trauma and emerge, like your interpretation of Ezekiel, into something better. It never leaves you, correct?
No, it doesn't, but it allows for you to grow. You're not going to forget it because, I said in the book, somebody told me I'm a survivor, but I'm also a mom, a daughter, a sister, a friend, so you're still affected by the trauma. You just don't allow it to affect you as much as it used to. So you can get on with your life.
Rabbi Chaya Lerner, the author of the Torah of Trauma, available right now on Amazon and hopefully wider distribution soon. Chaya, Toda Rabah, thank you very, very much. Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Teaching and with the work that you're doing. It's sacred work. Hopefully I'll bump into you on I-95 one day. And
I'll bump into you, but maybe at a restaurant at the Murakami.
And you never know. You never know. To all of you, thank you very, very much for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, if you'd like to reach us, just email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. If you'd like to become a sponsor of some of these podcasts, again, just email me. We'll take it from there. And if you'd like to support the work of these podcasts, just go to the website and click on the donate button. It's conveniently located and easy to follow. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubeck and Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and a shout out to our producer, Steve Lubeck. Until we see each other again on the next Seekers of Meaning, I want to wish you just joy and happiness. Stay healthy, and most of all, be kind to one another. Todah.